Hi, I'm Suzanne Gibbs Howard, and we are here with IDEO U in our Creative Confidence series. And today I have Paul Bennett, who's IDEO's Chief Creative Officer, and I'm very excited to have him here. He's
Hi.
a good friend and a collaborator for a long time, and we are here to talk about inspiring creativity in all sorts of organizations. So please, as always, we welcome you, and we'd love for you to chat in where you are calling in from this morning. We welcome people from all parts of the globe.
Hi, world.
And I thought we'd just dive right in and start talking to Paul. He is incredibly charismatic, dynamic, and inspiring. And I'm going to have you break yourself down a little bit and tell me what is it? How do you think about creative leadership? Where do you begin, and what your stance is?
I think you begin with truth. I think you begin with your own truth. I think you have to live a life that is out there in the world. I mean, I think one of the best pieces of advice I was ever given was, if you want to comment on the world, you have to live in it. So I think I voraciously live in the world in whatever way, shape, or form that comes. So I travel, I'm curious, I look at things. I am a big believer, and I've said this to you before, in swimming at both the deep end and the shallow end of the pond. So I love everything from sort of white papers and Harvard Business Review all the way down to sort of pop culture and fashion and everything else in between. And I think the whole mix is what makes it all compelling. So I'm constantly looking, constantly traveling, constantly asking. And so for me, this notion of curiosity is something that's kind of at the cornerstone. I was sort of bred, I think, to do what I do. My father was in the military, so we traveled a lot as a kid. And my mother was a synchronized swimmer, as you know, which tells you everything.
That says it all.
This says it all. I can
Yeah.
basically end this
Military,
right here.
synchronized swimmer. Yeah.
Right, here we go. Done.
Equals truth.
Equals truth. So, you know, it was a constant state of sort of curiosity as a child. We were always moving from place to place. And so, you know, I've sort of now, my job is to be inspiring. It's not just a thing I get to do because I have a good job. My job is to be inspiring and to bring out inspiration in others and to get them to understand that their job is to be inspiring. So working hard on being inspiring and inspired, to me, is not a luxury, it's a necessity.
Yeah.
And, you know, and so breaking myself down, I take being inspiring and being inspired very, very seriously. I view it as a practice, as a discipline, and I work very hard at it.
Yeah, yeah. I know that you are out in the world, always looking for patterns, always observing things. And one of the questions that I can see from our community, who are, by the way, calling in from all over the place. So a special welcome to people in Sonoma.
Hello from Shanghai. Hello from Fort Lauderdale. Hello from Nyack.
Yeah. Brazil, welcome. So thank you,
Hi,
everyone,
Brazil.
for joining us. But I can see that some of the questions people are asking is, what do we mean by truth? How do you know what the truth is, and how does that connect to the way you are in the world?
Well, I mean, again, truth is a very, we live in very strange times. Truth is a very abstract concept. I mean, to me, you know, you have to sort of listen. You have to genuinely not walk into the room assuming you have the answer. One of the, again, you know, life lessons of 54 years old, I feel slightly more sort of reflective about where I am in my sort of creative journey. One of the great pieces of feedback that actually Jane Fulton Surrey gave me years ago when I first joined IDEO is, it's not your job to walk in the room with the answer. It's your job to walk in the room with the great question that everybody can answer. And so to me, truth and questions and finding the right questions go hand in hand. So you have to listen, and you have to genuinely look, and you have to understand kind of the multiplicity of points of view that are usually around any given topic. You have to plant yourself into that narrative. You have to say, what does it mean to me personally? Again, I'm a big believer that as a designer, my sort of truth is just as important as anybody else's. So, you know, I sort of think, how's my life got me to this point? What have I learned to get me here? What have I heard to get me here? What am I curious about getting other people to hear? So, you know, I think it's a combination of all of those things. It is certainly not walking in the room with, you know, Mr. Big Chief Creative Officer hat on and going, here is the answer.
Yeah.
Increasingly, my role is not that. And naturally, I'm very happy about that. My role is to walk in and go, here's kind of what I'm hearing. Here's kind of what I'm thinking. What can we all do? How might we all move into a space together about that? So those two go hand in hand.
Tell us, it'd be great to dive into like a concrete example of a time where you saw it. So I know you've worked across an incredible range of projects, and some really hairy challenges. So you're currently working in the Middle East.
Yeah.
You've done work on all sorts of religions. You've done work on aging and trying to bring greater humanity to the aging process and death, sexuality, all sorts of things.
You name it.
So tell us a story about a time where you walked in and there was kind of a fogginess in what was going on in the effort or the challenge, and then you were able to help the room see how to move forward.
So aging's a fascinating one to me, because people talk about aging as if it's happening to someone else. Aging is a thing that is happening out there. And so we did all these workshops and sort of various conversations about aging, and I stood at the front and I said, here's my truth about aging. And I want us all to think about not just aging, but our own age and what it means to us and how we feel. And I told a story, which was completely true, about how I was born just 3 days short of my father's 40th birthday. I was an accidental child. And so my father, when I turned 10, was 50. I thought he was old, right? And so my dad took me to school, and my classmates made fun of him because he was like old. And I remember thinking, I kind of joined in to try and fit in. And I remember saying to everybody in sort of room, I turned 50 4 years ago, and my first thought on my 50th birthday was, God, what a dick I'd been to do that, right? And so I said, right, so there's my story. My narrative is that actually I'm now that person. I'm now my dad, and I'm now that age, and I actually feel more vital and alive than ever before. So my truth is this. What's yours? And you know what? Sometimes it's quite an interesting position to be in the front of the room when you're guiding people through this experience, because you can watch people's body language and you can see how people are kind of going. And I'm watching everybody swallowing, and I go, because all of a sudden you can see that moment where everybody's going, it's not it, it's me.
Yeah.
And you suddenly you're like, here we go, this is the moment. So for me, and again, you know, I think this is something maybe to sort of pass on. You have to put yourself into the narrative, and you have to come from a place of truth. And actually, often that truth, which is quite often quite hard to say out loud, it's the most powerful tool you have. It's the most defensible tool you have.
Yeah.
You know, my father died 12 years ago, and when I went into the space of end of life, and I was like, I need to. The way people are dying is really broken, and I need to do something about this. It's horrible. I can't stand the idea that somebody would die in a hospice like my dad. Miserable and loss of dignity and all of these things that happened to him at the end. And so I was on stage and I was talking about end of life, and somebody put their hand up and they said, what makes you an expert on death? And I said, my dad died. That makes me a total expert. It makes all of us experts, because we all face these things in our own personal lives. So I think there's something about that. To me, that idea of kind of, you have to go there. I always say to people, if you're asking people to get naked, you got to take your clothes off first. Mm-hmm. You got to go.
So there's some sort of interesting combination of you get deeply personal with these things, feel it viscerally yourself, and you're not afraid to bring that into the room. At the same time, you also have this unique ability and unique skill to look at patterns across the entire globe, because you're constantly moving in those spheres. So that's like deep end and shallow end of the pool at the same time. And that's one of the things that allows you to identify great questions, great challenges, great ways forward,
and great connections. Mm-hmm. And you can start to reflect your own ideas off of other people's experiences, and your own ideas shift in the process. So it's really, I mean, again, one of my big learnings up now at this stage is people are fundamentally the same. Most people kind of want the same thing. Most people want their kids to have a great, better future than them, and most people want to do the right thing in the right way. And all of the rest of it is sort of nuance. But in general, I think you can meta out from these things, and you can locate yourself in these conversations in a way that you may not be the same as somebody else, but you share the same thing. Yeah. And I'm finding that again and again that's the case.
Yeah, lovely. So a couple of people are asking a few questions, and one thing I have to tell you is that our friend Melanie, so we know one of the things going on right around us at this time that we need to recognize is that there are still massive fires burning in the Bay Area, and Melanie from Sonoma is watching us. She compliments your tattoo.
Oh, yay. A, hi, Melanie. B, thank you. And C, stay safe.
Yeah, so...
Can I ask a question that's up there?
Sure.
I love this question. When you're not feeling inspired, do you fake it?
Yeah.
No. Nobody, no. And actually, this is maybe not a great leadership lesson to transfer to everybody, but I'm going to do it anyway. I think creativity and authenticity are absolutely part of the same thing. You cannot fake it. So if a client says to me, oh, like, be on, and I'm not feeling on, or I'm jet lagged, or I'm tired, or I'm just generally not feeling it, I don't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I can orient conversations in certain ways, but I don't fake it.
Yeah.
And so I think you have to come from a place of truth. Again, I say this again and again, and you have to be genuinely curious. One of the things I do find, again, as I'm getting older, I'm sort of mentally Rolodexing all of my experiences so I can draw those things forward at any given time. So when people are like, oh my God, I just saw this thing in Africa, you should know about this. So I have this sort of filing cabinet of ideas that I can draw forward, and I find as I get older, I'm more sort of confident about the fact that that exists.
Yeah.
But I don't fake.
Yeah.
I never do this. I don't do jazz hands anymore.
Yeah.
I used to, as you well know.
What are some of the great questions? We have some people asking, how do you know it's a great question? I'd love to just hear maybe first some of the big questions that you've been working on around the globe.
I mean, the big, to me, I have a sort of general, what a great space to occupy right now is what our colleague Donna Cho describes as the void, which is the dark stuff, right? I think it's design's role, responsibility to go into the dark and the complicated. And again, I'm a big believer in metaphor. It's like going into the cave with a torch and seeing the sparkly things on the wall when you shine light on them, right? So for me, for a while, I've been quite obsessed with going into the dark spaces and finding light. And I think those provide great questions. And I don't think of them as taboo topics. In fact, I think many of them are universal things. Like, again, end of life is one, aging is one, mental health is one. Right now, gender is one that I'm very, very interested in. Gender roles, gender balance. Things that are traditionally seen as difficult, I actually think the simpler you can make them for people, the more light you shine on them. I always tell this story. Years ago, I was invited to speak in the UK in Parliament, which was super weird, and they brought in inspiring people, and I had no idea why I was there. Anyway, I'm sitting in the middle of Parliament, trying to be inspiring, and there was a round table with super clever people, and me, and they go around the table, and all these various other people, and like a Nobel Prize winning somebody or other, and a so-and-so economist, and some prime minister of something or other, and me, and it said, and this woman was moderating, and she said, what do you do? And I said, I'm a designer. And she went, huh, why are you here? And I said, no idea. And I said, let me tell you what we do. And I said, we go out into the world and we talk to people and we sit in their homes and we have cups of tea and we listen to their ideas and we make ideas together. And we build those ideas often out of cardboard, and then we see how they feel, and then we build them more, and then hopefully they go out into the world and they change people's lives. And there was this pause. And then this guy shouted down from the balcony, who I think was like a member of parliament, I think that's what we're supposed to do as well. And everybody clapped. And I was like, okay, it'll be okay. So that was a pivotal moment. It gave me kind of confidence to go into things that I actually have no idea about, like government or policy is. Go into these worlds, but use the toolkit that I've been taught to be able to navigate, to shine, metaphor aside, to sort of, I have the torch, and I know that if I shine it in the right way, it will find ways inside the light.
So and I feel like I've seen you tackle such a huge
by the way,
variety of challenges.
This isn't coffee. This isn't coffee. This is a big idea. This is water, which is a real downer.
So in the kinds of challenges I've seen you work in small and sometimes struggling countries with their economies are small and they're trying to figure out
Iceland.
how to play
Yes.
on a global scale.
Yes.
I've seen you work with religions struggling to draw more people in and be more welcoming was one of the questions that I saw you frame in the world of Judaism. How can Judaism be more welcoming?
And I'm an ex-Catholic altar boy.
Yes.
So that gave me tremendous love.
When you have identified a question, one of the things that I think you're amazing at is then catalyzing people forward. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about some of the things you do once you've identified a direction, then how do you help that group move?
I sort of use my own professional idiocy as a tool, which is I have a pretty short attention span, and I'm a pretty good storyteller. So you put all those three things together. I don't have a lot of time for like rhetoric and like, all of this sort of circuitous stuff. I sort of want to tell a great story, and I want that story to move me, not just inform me, but move me. And I want that story to be something that is transmittable to many people. So I will often say in a workshop, as you and I, I've done many times together, just tell me like the story quickly. Write the thing, write the one pager, give me the charter. We're doing this work in the Middle East at the moment. I'm like, give me the charter that is not just the strategy, but is the manifesto and is the thing that's going to move my heart and not just inform my head.
Yes.
And the second, and again, I firmly believe that I always jokingly said, I think I'm a designer, I think I'm in energy management, but I'm in the energy management business. Once you can put something into the room that feels energetically like that, you watch everybody else move around it and they start to hold it because they identify with it. It's not complicated. It's not a 75-page PDF with 12 bullet points on every page. It's essentially 5 pages with like hello at the beginning and thank you at the end. And so I try very much, and again, I'm not being dismissive about this. I believe that essentialism and simplification is one of the most powerful business tools that exists. And, you know, the death by PowerPoint thing is just not my vibe, but the story that moves is my vibe. And I firmly believe that that's a tool of the designer, but B, it's a huge tool for creativity and for business and ultimately, I think, for sort of humanity, to be able to help people understand the world that we are in.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've heard you do many times and talk about is walking into a room with lots and lots of ideas. And I think the work we do at IDEO and this kind of creative work these days often gets distilled down to like, oh, it's lots of Post-it notes. But what you do is you pick the one thing, the big idea. That's one of the things you always talk about. What's the big idea? And then you elevate it and tell people that's the one. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how you think about your role in doing that as a not just a leader, but a creative leader.
I'm very years ago, Suzanne and I had a colleague, Joanne, who if she's listening, hi Jo, who once gave me one of the best pieces of feedback ever. And I was kind of I was a bad creative director for a while when I first came. I came from an old mental model of like, I would have to be the sort of controller of everything and I needed to be the sort of overlord of everything excellent, which was just ridiculous. Anyway, she said to me, I had not been at IDEO long, and she came to me and she said, I want to give you a piece of feedback. And she said, I love what you say, but not on a Friday. I love what you say, but not on a Friday. And I was like, what does that mean? And she's like, you always come in at the end and you like mess with stuff and then we're all working on a weekend and we all hate you. And I'm like, whoa. So from that moment, I have never, A, come on a Friday. B, I've always been very careful about when I show up and with what and at what given time. Beginning of a project, huge amounts of energy, lots of ideas, lots of abundance, lots of curiosity, lots of divergence. Middle of a project, shoulder to shoulder, I'm in with you, I'm there, I sort of got you. End of a project, I bless you as you leave the door. My role is, first thing I'll say when I walk into a project space is, when are you next seeing the client? And if the answer is tomorrow, I am not a dick. And I don't do the whole, if I was you, I would change, blah, right? So managing your time and managing how you show up, but there are times, and we, much as we love IDEO, we know this about ourselves, we can get caught in our own knitting better than anybody, right? Well, our swirl can be crazy. And part of the role of any creative leader is to come in and find the clarity. So again, back to my sort of short attention span thing, I have now trained myself a little bit like a sort of falcon. I can see the prey from a sort of pretty far distance. I can find and I can often feel where the team is kind of converging on an idea. And I can sort of see that path and I can help grab it, put it in the center of the table, and sort of back to what I said to you before. Let's tell this story to ourselves. Let's figure out how we might tell this story to the client. Let's figure out how together how we might tell that story to the world.
Lovely.
So, you know, it's a little bit like sort of falcon eyes, where you sort of down to something.
I want to build on that. So Arthur is asking a question about the searching together for truths.
Yeah.
And what really works when people are ready to tell their truths. What can you do to help them reach that space? And as we were talking last week, you shared one thing that I thought was just brilliant. You've like a very simple, elegant structure that can help anybody begin to tell their story.
Yeah.
The 1, 2, 3 of like main baseline framework for telling a story by Paul Bennett.
The main baseline framework is, again, tell me a story about tell me a story about yourself, right? I want to know why you're standing in front of me. Who are you and what got you to this moment? And that isn't some like life thing, but like, tell me who you are and tell me why this matters and tell me why I should care. Yeah. Right. So for me, that's like, hey, I grew up as a synchronized swimmer, military overlap, and I'm an agitated traveler. And so and I've seen multiple things, so it allows me to be in this moment. And I'm excited about the challenge. B, so that's bucket A, is locate you to me. Bucket 2 is tell me the evidence to what you've done. So tell me the stories, and again, don't just tell me what you've done, tell me what's inspired you, tell me about failure, tell me the things that have worked, tell me the things you wished had worked. So essentially give me evidence of the thing that you're trying to understand. And again, so that's bucket 2, is stories and evidence that support the idea. And then bucket 3, which is sort of what you were just saying, leave me with questions, don't give me the answer. And there's nothing worse, and again, as I speak as somebody who spends a lot of time on stage, there's nothing worse than a presenter who comes up on stage, lambasts the audience for the thing that they think they should be doing, and then sits down. A, it's bullshit, and B, I just don't think that's cool, right? So for me, I always leave the audience with, if I was you, I'd be thinking about X, or I'd be thinking about Y. Wouldn't it be great if we were all doing Z? So make me like you, make me believe you, make me follow you. And on those 3, I think, and again, follow's a strong word. I don't mean it in sort of a cult-like way, but make me want to do something in response to what you just told me. So I do every presentation around. I always coach teams on, tell them why you're here, tell them what you've done, tell them why it matters.
Lovely.
Over and over again.
Wonderful. That's a gold mine for people to work with.
Is that all like tips and tricks-ish for you guys? Love tips and tricks, right?
We do.
Let me have some of my coffee.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you one more thing, and then we have a wealth of questions that we want to dive into. But one more thing that, while we are here, I want to ask you about is that we are currently working on a new course, a new class on purpose, leading through purpose. And as we've been talking a lot about truth, I'm curious what you think is happening right now in the world with leading through purpose, and why purpose is such a hot topic.
Well, it's a hot topic for obvious reasons, because we live in an era of completely weird what is truth, right? So you have to walk the walk. I mean, there's a trillion examples where a single thing has taken down an empire, right? We're in that space now where rightly so, people are questioning truth and fake. People are voting with their dollars around things that matter to them, and people are increasingly looking for organizations to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. And all of those 3 things to me are a big yay. I think that's awesome. So, what used to be perceived of as I'm going to make something, I'm going to sell it to people, those days are completely over. Now I'm going to figure out what it is, and I'm going to tell people. So again, I think I've told you this story before. We were asked the difference between IDEO and an advertising agency we were working with, and the difference was, you guys look for the truth and tell it, and they create the myth and sell it. And we're not in mythological times. I mean, it is mythological enough out there without us perpetuating any more myths, let's be honest. So for me, the idea of it has to be real, it has to be truthful, and you have to just get as simple as possible a line from A to B. That to me is kind of where we find ourselves. And to me, I couldn't find that to be a more clarifying moment in political history, in personal sort of times, and in the world of businesses and brands.
And in the world is filled with so much complexity right now, it's the way to catalyze.
I mean, I look at my own, I view myself as somebody who's fairly savvy about the world, and I look at the things that I personally gravitate to, and they always have something in the middle that is like genuinely truthful.
Yeah. Well, so I think you're getting a good taste of Paul Bennett here. He's unabashedly subjective, and yet balances that with such an incredible perspective on what's going around the globe and what can inspire people. So I'm going to come to some of the questions that we're seeing here. There's one from Julia that I think is really interesting. How does IDEO inspire creativity while maintaining a strategic focus? And frankly, this is something that as a very creative organization, we all struggle with. I'd love for you to talk about some of the moments you've worked
Julia H, if you have the answer to that, could you please come and tell us? I mean, honestly, it's a kind of seesaw, right? But I mean, a large part of IDEO's strategic strategy is that our clients take us into the future by asking us amazing questions. So we don't sit in a room and cook up the future and we're like whiteboarding frameworks. We are genuinely kind of interested about the world, and we allow ourselves to be kind of dragged. So one part of all of that is our clients are a huge contributor in our strategic sort of direction, because they pull us, they ask us questions that we haven't been asked before, and they pull us with a lot of trust, I think, in many cases, into places that we would never have thought possible. So that's one. But back to my UK Parliament story, I think we fundamentally now trust our creative process and our creativity. We don't undermine our creativity. We don't think it's going to go away. And so again, I tips and tricks for everybody out there: take your creativity seriously. Trust that it's real. I mean, again, as somebody who's slightly older, I was obsessed when I was young, as a young creative director or a young creative, that my talent was going to go away when I got older, that I was going to be one of those old, weird creative guys who was sort of hanging on to it. And actually, I feel more creative than ever before. And so part of it is, I think, trusting that creativity is something that grows over time, and that it shapeshifts, and allowing yourself the luxury of listening to where the world is taking you, as opposed to thinking you have an idea and just steadfastly walking towards it. I think we're in a quite lucky position in that we allow ourselves to be pulled, and our ability to be able to go, here are the 5 things that we do, can take us into, whether it's end of life or whatever the end of life, or curiosity, in any different way. You can go to the most complicated topics, but know that you have a sort of orientation towards solving them.
What are some other things? There are some other questions about what are the things that get you into creative flow? What are your personal practices right now? And you go, he lives in a place that he fondly calls the Death Star.
Yeah.
If you don't follow Paul on Instagram, you should, because it was very visually stimulating. But tell us, what do you do when you go to the Death Star to get inspired?
So years ago, I was interviewed by a magazine in Singapore about creativity, and they said, so your ID as Chief Creative Officer, like, what's that all about? And they said, what do you do? And I sort of told everybody what it said here. I said, I'm trying to be inspiring. And they said, what do you do? And I said, I read and I watch things on TV and I go on the internet. I'm one of those guys that goes, when they go to JFK, I have like 7 bags of magazines and I tear them all up and leave them on the airplane at the end. That's like one of the things I do. And this woman said to me, I can't believe you get paid for that. And I said, okay, let's reframe this for a second. Let's imagine I'm an Olympic athlete. And you said to me, what's your training schedule? And I say, well, I swim for 3 hours and I weightlift for 2 hours and I eat really well and I look after my body and I do this as my practice. Would you think that was weird? And she said, no. And I said, well, I'm a creative athlete. And so this is my creative muscle that I don't want to atrophy. And so I work very hard at it. So to me, this is not something I do like at the weekends. I don't think of, oh, I'm going to go and be creative now. To me, this is built into the flow of my every single day. And I love social media and I love the world and I'm constantly curious about things. One of the things I love about the internet is just the weird random drag that you can get through it. So I'm on YouTube, then I'm on some weird blog, then I'm in Harvard Business Review, and then I'm back out again. And again, the metaphor is, to me, I feel like a bit like a blue whale, and I'm just going through the ocean with my mouth wide, and I'm constantly trawling for plankton, and that is just coming in and coming in and coming in. So
that's just a way of being in the world.
It's just a way of being in the world. And I'm on the surface being deeply shallow, and sometimes I'm back in the deeps being really deep. And I find this ability to be able to kind of go through the ocean, if you like.
I've heard you say before, from Buddha to Beyonce.
From Buddha to Beyonce and everything else in between. Yeah, I mean, Beyonce is Buddha on some level anyway. So yes.
One question that we're getting from Miguel is, he's asking us, how do you bring creativity into parts of a company or parts of a challenge where when the final solution isn't defined yet? So when it's in that state of ambiguity, how do you manage that process?
Again, storytelling is a fantastic tool. Storytelling is a tool that, for me, it doesn't have to be about the end story. It can be about the during story or the beginning story. So again, I don't think story is a thing that's a deliverable.
It's not the pitch.
No, I always say that the journey is often more interesting than the destination. So for me, again, whether it's on day 1 or day 3 or day 300, I'm constantly getting people to chronicle, what have you learned? What have you seen? What's difficult? What's weird? What makes you want to go this way versus this way? How might we think about these things? Tell me a story about why. So for me, storytelling is an anchor, and I use it throughout the entire process. And again, it's not always the same kind of story. I think getting people to, again, one of my personal things is getting people to talk about their own feelings in the moment. How are you in this right now? Not how is it, not how is aging, how are you feeling? I can see you're feeling vulnerable about this thing called aging. Tell me about that and what might we do together? So helping people orient themselves inside of a larger complex thing. Again, think about yourself. You know, I often say, what do I think? Oh, well, that's pretty good. I'm not dumb. So let's see if it works for you as well.
Have you ever seen that vulnerability or subjectivity go off the rails where somebody was
Yes.
using it? Like, what do you do in a situation like that?
This is the best part of being British, in that we get to use self-deprecation and humor because it's culturally appropriate. So I get to swear and I get to say weird shit and I get to like reorient people back in a kind of truthful reality. So we can get very California here, as we know, but we like to use the Britishness of kind of Britishness is a sort of shortcut for being sort of humorously pragmatic. So yes, people tend to go off into the kind of the weeds a little bit sometimes, but also I think, you know, I mean, all joking aside, if somebody is moved by something that we're doing, that's a big idea, right? If someone's crying or if somebody's having a moment that they want to share, you know, I think we tend to encourage it. You know, so much of business is about holding that side of you in check. And a lot of what we do is and I see it. You can see from afar now, I'm sort of attuned to these moments where you can see over the horizon, this person's thing is sort of rising. You can see it coming. And so I'm like, this one here is going to have a thing. This one here is going to have a moment. Let's just sort of watch it. And so often we encourage it. We use humor to sort of diffuse it, and we put ourselves in it. And I think we're pretty lucky in that if you genuinely model that stuff yourself and you genuinely are feeling the feels, people know that you're on their side. You're not there to make fun of them. You're not there to do anything other than support them in that. But it can go pretty. I mean, you know, it can go pretty crazy. Particularly when you put a topic like religion, end of life, age in front of people, you're demanding that that's an intense topic. I mean,
well, and I'm curious. So we have some questions here about in that deeply emotional, deeply personal, deeply vulnerable context. How do you give feedback? What are you going to do if somebody needs some constructive feedback?
I mean, I have a naughty stool kind of process, right? So, I mean, again, we sort of have a like, okay, there's two ways for us to have this conversation. We can do it right now, one-on-one, kind of in the corner where you need to chill out. Or we can have it in front of everybody where it's not going to be cool, right? So, I mean, we have a sort of process. I have a process, I think we all do, of sort of understanding. And again, I'm sort of familiar with this now, so I can see on the horizon, this person's kind of grumpy and we need to do a thing. Also, I think we need to encourage the debate. I mean, again, I think often in what we do, there can be a lot of sort of love and affection. Sometimes you need the tension in the room. I mean, you and I saw, and Susan and I were working on this project together around Judaism, and it is not a brainstorm fixie topic.
No.
It's complicated with dogma and all kinds of stuff that goes behind that, and people's life work. It's not for me to roll in and go, hey, you know. So you have to take that stuff seriously, and you have to acknowledge it. But you have to say to people, there's a time and a place for this conversation. This is a time where we're actually going to design our way forward. We're not here to debate. And so I always say to clients, if you want to debate, yay, but I'm way too expensive to basically be a debate facilitator. I'm a better use of your money to be a designer. And so let's focus on that for now, and then let's hold the debate to a different time or a different place where it actually feels like it can be more useful.
Yeah. So that makes me, Melanie Monks is asking a question. Would you say, in that context, would you say you have a problem-focused mindset or a solution-driven outlook? I know that's kind of like, I was thinking, I don't know if I can even answer that, but
I don't even know the difference. I don't know what the difference is. I think of them both as the same. I mean, I'm fundamentally a change-based mindset, whether it's about identifying the problem or identifying a solution. I mean, certainly, I don't want to be one of those people whose legacy is, we talked about a whole bunch of difficult things, bye-bye. I mean, I would like to be able to say we shifted the needle on a whole bunch of things and we're able to prove that there was, you know, however small, evidence of change. So probably more solution-based. But certainly in order to get to the kinds of solutions that motivate me, you have to look at the problems in a really, really different way. You have to go into the problems and you have to stare the problems down.
Yeah. So I'm curious also, one of the things that we've seen in our decade and a half of working together is a big shift in the role of design in organizations. So there used to
Bring it
be
on.
like a design team, and now there's like a designer innovation department, and now we're starting to see this shift where we see designers as chief
CEOs.
design officers, as CEOs, design more at the core of the company. So we've got a couple questions about people saying, how would you argue against the sidelining of a design department, or would you argue for it to be infused, or what are the different?
It depends on the organization and the stage of the journey. There's no one answer to that. I mean, in some organizations, I think it's totally fine that there's a design team because design sits in a different place. My goal would be to have design sit across, the most broad and useful place inside every organization. I'm all for designers kind of ruling the world. I think we should. So I think there's something fantastic about that, but it has to be the right people. Again, I think that bad design in the wrong place in an organization can do more harm than good.
Yeah.
So it's a mental approach. It's the right people. It's the right spirit of optimism. It's the right ability to be able to galvanize the right people. It's not just as simple as having a design department. There has to be a design mindset. So again, I always say that to me, design is sort of the overlap between two things. It's optimism and pragmatism. It's the ability to believe that change is possible and the ability to do something about that. It's not one or the other. Yeah. Often you can have design evangelists who have no idea about what it takes to do this stuff, or you can have design pragmatists who are so far down in the I need to get this done that they're not heads above the parapet. I want to be able to change things. So I believe that the sort of new design, if you want to call it that, or this sort of design thinking thing, is the opportunity to do both of those things.
Okay, so the actual pragmatic execution, but as well as holding those conversations at the higher levels to drive things.
And also, I mean,
wherever you sit is relative to that.
And you need to have an appreciation for both. I mean, I'm a graphic designer, and I still care about the typeface that my presentation is done in, and I still understand why the story that I'm writing needs to have the right words done in a beautiful way, and I can still create those things. I remember there was a day when I changed laptops years ago, and somebody took the typefaces off my laptop, and I had a total meltdown because it felt like my toolkit was taken away from me. My self-expression toolkit disappeared. And so even if I don't use all 2,740 fonts, I want to know they're there.
Okay.
That's my heart in that.
That's part of your mindset.
That's part of my, actually, it's part of my hands. Yeah. That's literally jazz hands. Yeah. That's part of my hands.
So if you think about the beyond typeface choice, which is important.
Yeah.
And one of the things that is weakness for me as a designer, but what are some of the other skills and mindsets that you see as you look across, not just yourself as a creative leader, but others that you admire? What are some of the mindsets that you see across creative leaders in general?
The ability to read a room is really important. You have to, again, I always jokingly say, IDEO was not a company. IDEO was a design company, right? And there's a very different energy around creative organizations. We don't just follow steps. I always make the joke that IDEO is a little bit like the cafeteria in Fame, where everybody's playing the cello and crying and singing and up and down, right? We're in the best possible way. This is a highly emotional world we live in. You're asking people to commit their heart and soul to topics that are complicated and deep and wide. Therefore, own what comes with that, which is an unbelievable amount of stuff. So, creative people need a lot of leading, and they need to follow people that understand that, and they need to follow people that actually, on some level, have that within them as well. I'm playing the cello and crying just along with everybody else. So one of the things I admire is people's ability to read a room, is to go in and sort of go, it's my role here is to be an energizer, or my role is to be a catalyzer, or my role here is just simply be a supporter. Yeah. And you have to know when you go in a room, Suze's team's feeling a bit weird. I need to come in and kind of, or Suze's team's feeling a little bit scattered. I need to help them do this. Right?
That ability to read a room is absolutely critical. And then to give the feedback of the direction, know which point you're in the process.
And again, be truthful. Yeah. Like, one of the things that I think is very true about creative people is you don't speak down, you speak at eye level. If I was you, I'd be X. And because I'm like you, I see you need to do Y. And so for me, this ability to A, understand the room, and B, talk to the room in a way that's appropriate, which in many cases is because I kind of feel the same way that they do, is super important. So I admire the ability to feel the ether of a room, and to not just override because you think this is my role. My role is to come in with the answer. I'm just going to keep on talking until everybody hears me. Does not work.
So as somebody who I know is always pushing yourself, always holding that growth in yourself, what's something you're working on in your own leadership at this time?
Again, more intentional, more focused, more listening, always more listening, more truth. I mean, again, I think turning 50 is quite interesting as a creative person. It's quite, for all of you out there who aren't even close to 50, it's kind of a thing. I decided when I was 50 that I was just going to be completely myself. I was going to tell the truth. I wasn't going to spin things. I wasn't going to sell things. I wasn't going to do, inauthentic things. Not that I actually really was. I mean, I wasn't a sort of shyster. I think I was actually on that journey for a long time. But at 50, I was like, total truth. So now I say to clients, like one of my lines very early on in the client conversation is, I don't do client disco. So I'm not the one who's going to be like all over you. Like, we're going to be truthful, and we're going to have a conversation at the beginning, and we're going to establish what I'm going to tell you, what I need from you, and you're going to tell me what I need from me, and we're going to hold each other to that.
True deep partnership.
Super truthful, and I'm going to tell you where I'm failing, and I'm going to tell you that I failed before you tell me that I failed. You're going to, so we did a session recently with a client where we gave them feedback about us, as opposed to saying, why don't you give us feedback about us? I'm like, I'd like to give you feedback about us. And they were like, oh. And then we sort of went there. And I think so that to me has been, that's the thing I'm really interested in the moment, is showing up in the most honest way possible.
Wonderful. Well, I know we are...
Plus tattoo.
Yes. 1 second, 1 minute on your tattoo. Tell us what's going on here.
So I'm 54, and I've waited 14 years for a tattoo, and I waited on this guy's waiting list for a year to get this thing. And so I was a nerdy, crafty kid, and so my dad bought me these craft magazines, and so I did all these weird things like knitting and macrame when I was a kid, and so I wanted to, and string art. So string art is the basis of this. And so I sent this tattoo artist some pictures of stuff I made when I was a kid, and I had absolutely no say in the creative process. I show up having committed all of my kind of life and soul to this thing, and he literally presents me with this visual and says, this is how I see you. And it was the most, all joking aside, tattooing, all of that, all joking aside, it was the most profound learning about my own, about my own creativity, but about the idea of how our clients must feel about surrendering to someone else's creative process. A, it was profoundly humbling. B, to listen to somebody else's vision of you, and C, just to lie there and literally like have it done to you was amazing. So I'm hooked. So I'm doing the whole thing.
It's growing. Next time he comes
back
it's
other arm, palm of hand,
up on his face. So thank you everyone for joining us today. You can learn more from Paul inside of the Leading for Creativity course. We've got 3 more courses running this year. So the last 3 courses this year will start on November 8th. And we have Leading for Creativity, From Ideas to Action, and also our newest course that we are just launching, Designing for Creativity, or Designing for Change. And so we're thrilled to welcome people in all of those. And thank you, Paul, for joining us today. Thank you, everyone, for all of your questions.
Thank you.
And we look forward to sharing more soon. Take care.
Boom.